In this experiment, we're going to test 3 different metals: magnesium, calcium, and aluminum. And we're going to see how they react with just plain old water. So here I just have water in a little dropper bottle. And the way that we're going to look for chemical reaction is a couple of different ways. One, you're going to directly observe what's going on in the well and write down what you see. But another way is we're going to use these things here. These are called litmus paper. And litmus paper changes color when you change its pH. So normally if we're just using water, so let's go ahead and put some water in this well. We'll call it our control. So control means there's no chemical in there. We're just making sure that the water is a neutral pH. So to test this water, I'm going to take this piece of litmus paper, dip it in, and see if there's a color change. And it turns out that there is not a color change. So let me get this saturated as much as possible. Now when you look at that, I mean, it's a darker red just because the paper got wet. But apart from the paper getting wet, we don't see any color change. So let's leave this over here. And we'll keep that as our reference point for the future experiments and see if any of the other litmus papers, either this, or this, changes color. Let's go ahead and start with magnesium. Now, as I add water, take a close look at magnesium and see if you can tell any changes that are happening. So here it goes. Adding a generous amount of water. So far, visually, it doesn't look like there's a lot going on. Let's go ahead and see if we can notice anything if we have brighter light. As of right now, we can't really see anything that's happening to the magnesium. So we'll let that sit there for a second. And let's move down the group. So from magnesium to calcium, we're moving down group 2. I'm going to add this and see what happens with calcium. You can see that a lot of bubbles are being produced. There's a slight fizzing sound, which you might be able to hear over the mic. But look at the difference in reactivity between magnesium and water, calcium and water. Which one is more reactive? Now to test and see what's going on with this reaction, we can use litmus paper again. So let me take this litmus paper and dip it in the calcium side of the reaction. See what happens. Check this out. It turned blue. Turned blue because a reaction occurred. The calcium produced some calcium hydroxide, which is a base, very high pH. So when I look at it compared to the control, you can see it really go now. So when I see this compared to the control, it's definitely changed color. So we know calcium reacts, and it reacts very vigorously. Let's see if we got anything with magnesium. So we'll take this paper, dip it in. Looks like I have a piece of magnesium stuck to my litmus paper, but other than that, there's no change in color. So think about what's happening to your chemical reactivity as you go down a group from magnesium to calcium. Which one was more reactive? Now I have aluminum here. Aluminum is across the period from magnesium. It's the same period as magnesium, but it's across on the other side of the periodic table. Let's see what happens if we add some water to aluminum. It looks like nothing is really happening. The aluminum is just kind of sitting there in water. You can see that calcium is still reacting down here. It hasn't stopped yet. But when we go ahead and put our litmus paper in for aluminum, Notice how we're seeing nothing. So from this experiment, you should be able to tell what's going on down a group. You don't yet know what's happening across a period because both of these are not reacting as strongly as calcium is, but at least now you know what's going on down a group. In the next video, instead of using water in our experiment, like we did this time, we used water, we will be instead using hydrochloric acid. So hydrochloric acid is, as the name suggests, very acidic, and it can cause reactions that we didn't get to see out of water. So follow the next video to see what happens when magnesium reacts with hydrochloric acid compared to aluminum so that we can figure out what's happening across a period.